And welcome back to the Kelly File and an interview we have been wanting to do for a while. Over the last 12 months of campaign coverage, there have been more than 20 sanctioned political debates, dozens of political town halls, and a countless number of candidate interviews. While all the best ones have been on the Fox News channel and obviously the Kelly File, one other political journalist has managed to hold his own from time to time, and here are a couple of his more memorable exchanges.
I thought it was a nice picture of Heidi. I thought it was fine.
Come on.
I didn't start it.
Okay,
I didn't start it.
But, sir, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old.
I didn't start it. No, it's not the.
Yeah,
no,
the argument of a 5-year-old is he started
You would say that.
Look, I made speeches to lots of groups. I told them what I thought. I answered questions.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered. So.
Let's be clear. How many hours of free media does CNN and Fox and every other station, you let him call in and for a year,
well, I got to say, we've asked you for interviews pretty much every day, and you've declined every offer on my program.
Well,
so
Anderson, I'm right here, and I'll point out.
Joining me tonight for the first time, Anderson Cooper. He's the host of Anderson Cooper 360 on CNN, star of the new documentary Nothing Left Unsaid, and co-author of the New York Times #1 bestseller, The Rainbow Comes and Goes, A Mother and Son on Life, Loss, and Love. Great to see you, Anderson. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the success of the book. #1 New York Times.
Yeah, it debuted at #1. My mom is thrilled.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. By the way, we invited Senator Cruz on last night. Didn't come in there.
He's coming here on the Kelly File tonight.
I'm sure.
I'll ask him some questions for you.
Okay.
I watched the documentary and was riveted and was really moved by it. And my own take on it was, in a way, it's a love letter to your mom. I mean, it's you getting to know her and helping us get to know her, and through that experience we get to know you too. Yeah,
you know, my dad died when I was 10, and I always had this fantasy growing up that he had written me a letter, and maybe that letter would show up when I turned 18 or when I turned 21. It would tell me all about, you know, about his life and what he wanted for my life. And of course there wasn't any letter. It turns out my mom had the exact same fantasy about her father, because her father died when she was 15 months old. And I realized when my mom turned 91, I didn't want to have that fantasy about my mom when she's no longer here. So we started doing this project together of emailing each other and just me asking her questions, her asking me questions, and getting to know each other in a new way. And that's what the book is, The Rainbow Comes and Goes, and the documentary is sort of a representation of that as well.
She's had such an incredible life. I mean, you know, you go, obviously Anderson is a Vanderbilt.
I consider myself a Cooper.
Right, but you've got it in your blood.
Yes, half of it, yes.
And it goes through just how she was obviously born into a very wealthy family and shuffled around. She really didn't have parents. She was pulled from the only real parent she ever knew, which was her nanny, her nurse, and, you know, an abusive marriage and tumultuous divorces, and then came the loss of her husband, your dad, and ultimately the loss of her son, your brother. Yeah,
my brother committed suicide in front of her when he was 23 and when I was 21. But, you know, she has this incredible resilience, and I think that's one of the things that really comes out in the book and the film is that, you know, she has this drive and determination to survive, and she's not a tough person, but she's very strong, and I think there's a big difference. You know, she's incredibly vulnerable, but she remains the most optimistic person I know. Despite all these things that have happened to her, she still thinks the next great love is right around the corner at 92. Which I find the idea of exhausting, frankly.
She's known a lot of people.
Yes.
She's been open about that.
Yes, very open about that.
Frank Sinatra among them.
Frank Sinatra, Marlon Brando, Howard Hughes.
But yes, I've heard of them. But you also are very, you lay yourself bare in the documentary and in the book. And what's clear in learning more about you is that the death of your brother in particular seemed to send you into a spiral for a time. You were all over the place.
Yeah, it really propelled me into the world, and propelled me particularly to start going to combat zones and wars and places. I was interested in survival and why some people survive, why two brothers growing up in the same family with the same circumstances, one survives and one doesn't. And I started out of college. I made a fake press pass. I borrowed a camera. I just started going to wars by myself, and that's how I became a reporter.
You were working something out there.
I wanted to be around places where the language of loss was spoken. You know, when you're grieving, sometimes it's not something people hear talk about that much, and I found it in an odd way, not comforting, but understandable to be in places where life and death was very much an issue, and where I could learn about how to survive.
You talk about Carter. He was only a couple years older than you were.
Yeah.
And his terrible death, and you go through it in detail, what happened that day. he seemed to be, for the most part, all right but like a few months before he started acting out emotionally. But did you ever wonder, since you also felt okay, do you wonder that what was inside of him that made him make that terrible decision that day?
Right.
Is in you?
Yeah, you know, first of all, with the suicide, that's the thing. You often don't know what was in somebody's head or in their heart. And I don't know that it was sort of a decision he made as more of an impulse that he couldn't stop. But certainly, you know, look, studies have shown if somebody commits suicide or dies by suicide in a family, you know, their relatives are more likely to, somebody else in the family is more likely to die that way as well. So I certainly have those concerns. And you know, I think part of, you know, when my dad died when I was a kid, you know, I started setting about a sort of a course of study on how to survive. I started taking survival courses in the wilderness. I started, you know, I left high school early. I rode in a truck across sub-Saharan Africa. You know, I was doing things to sort of prepare myself to take care of myself, and I've been, you know, doing that for a very long time.
Obviously, you were born into a wealthy family and had a loving mother, although the relationship has been complicated. It's gotten great.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, looking back on your 48 years so far, it's been a charmed life? It's been a cursed life?
Oh, no.
And
listen,
someplace in between?
I mean, I have a blessed life. I mean, I look, you know, yes, I was born into, you know, a great zip code and into a family with two parents who, you know, gave me a great sense of value in myself. And though, you know, there have been tragedies that have occurred, the death of my dad and my brother, you know, I wouldn't trade my life for anything. And you know, I think I feel, just as you probably feel, blessed to work in the profession that we work in and to be able to tell other people's stories and learn new stuff every single day and ride the breaking wave of history and see things for ourselves. You know,
I think it's interesting. You lost your dad when you were 10.
Right.
To heart disease.
Right.
You know, Savannah Guthrie of NBC News, she lost her dad when she was 16 years old.
I didn't know that.
Similar circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my dad to a heart attack when I was 15.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Don't you think it's interesting that those three kids wound up in prominent positions in television news?
Well, you know, Mary Gordon, a writer, my mom quotes her in the book, said, a fatherless girl, she was talking about herself, but I think it applies to boys as well, a fatherless girl thinks all things possible and nothing safe. And I think for any child, when you lose a parent early on, it does change the way you see the world, and it does make the world seem a very unsafe place. But also anything is possible, good things as well as terrible things. And I think for me, certainly, it gave me a sense of anything is possible. There are limitless possibilities if you just work incredibly hard.
Do you think we're looking to fill a void that is unfillable?
I certainly think I'm never content, and I think it's something I realized. One of the things in writing this book with my mom and sort of learning about my mom, I realized I'm following a pattern that she followed as well, which is this pattern of having this drive, but nothing ever really makes you content. It's, you know, you want a house with a white picket fence, but when you have it, it's still not enough. And I think that's a common thing for people who've lost at least one parent early on.
Let's talk about the election, because it's been such a crazy season.
You think?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard.
I've read. Yeah. Maybe a little crazier for you than for me.
Looking back so far, what's the moment that you were involved in I mean, I know what mine was, but what was your moment that stands out in your mind looking back in the past 12 months?
Oh, wow. Well, listen, I think first of all, that first debate you did, I mean, for everybody who was watching, was just a remarkable moment. And look, I give you great props for, you know, the dignity with which you have handled this and the strength with which you have shown, and asking completely legitimate questions both in that debate and since.
Thank you. But what do you think? You know, Campbell Brown has an interesting piece out right now, formerly of CNN and NBC News. You know, laying into the media. I've made remarks on this publicly myself about the saturation of Trump coverage. And this is not to say that the media had any obligation to stop any particular candidate. It's just, obviously, you've heard the criticism of CNN, of Fox, of many other outlets, that it's been just saturation. What do you think of that?
Look, I think anytime you have a person who's as compelling as Donald Trump, who's a new candidate, who hasn't been involved in the process, you know, there was the same criticism about over-coverage of Hillary Clinton or over-coverage of then Senator Barack Obama. Or
do you think it compares? I mean, the Trump coverage seems to be something special.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen the direct analysis of it, but I think Donald Trump is a candidate unlike any we've seen, and he's new to the process and so well known. But also, he did show up for interviews and he did return phone calls. And
you're seriously telling me that you invited Ted Cruz on as much as you invited Trump on?
We invited Ted Cruz on. We had standing invitations out to Ted Cruz all the time. Never once did he sit down for an interview, not until I did a town hall with him. That was the first time I'd ever talked to Ted Cruz.
I want to ask you a question. You have an amazing career, and you've traveled the globe, and you're doing great reporting for CNN. But there is a question about whether you're going to be taking a walk over to go sit next to your friend Kelly Ripa.
I haven't heard that question.
On Live with, I guess, now Kelly and Anderson.
Please.
Is that true?
Nothing. Nobody's talked to me. I haven't heard a thing about it. I love Kelly Ripa. Everybody knows she's a great friend of mine.
Is that something you'd be interested in? Because you have that fun side. You did a talk show. Like, you're not always the straight news man.
I like learning new stuff every single day. But I'm very happy at CNN. I'm not going anywhere. I mean, I love CNN. And look, I mean, I'm always open to new opportunities, as are you, from what I hear.
Well, Bill O'Reilly wanted me to ask you that, because he's
right?
hoping you're going to leave that 8 o'clock time slot.
Oh, is that right? Well, I think he's doing just fine. Yeah, I don't think he's too worried. But
thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. It's
Good luck
pleasure.
with the book. Good luck with it. The documentary is riveting. It's on HBO. It's going to be on CNN as well. Definitely check it out. All the
Thanks
best
so much.
to you.
Appreciate it.
He's a class act.